Welcome everyone, my name is Manuel Martinez and this is another episode of Career Downloads. For each episode I bring on a different guest to learn more about their background and their experiences to help uncover any actionable advice that you can use as you're managing your own career. For today's episode I have with me Chris Day. So he and I connected through a previous guest. He just kind of introduced me to Chris. We had a couple conversations. I got to know more about his background. I was really excited. He had kind of a different path. So I thought it'd be great to kind of bring him on and have him share those experiences. So with that, I'll introduce Chris. How's it going, Chris?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being able to make the time to come and share your experiences.
You got it.
So if you don't mind, kind of so that people who don't know you can get a sense of, kind of where you're at now in your career, just tell us a little bit about what your current role and responsibilities are, just so we can get a sense of where you're at now.
Okay, my current role is I'm a founder, CEO of A1 Enterprise. That's an enterprise risk management software business. We sell SaaS software that specializes in enterprise risk.
Nice. And I know we're going to get more into that, as the conversation goes, but now to really start the entire conversation, tell me about where you grew up and then what you thought you were going to do for a career, and then eventually kind of what your first job was.
I grew up in the Bay Area, San Jose, also known as Silicon Valley. Born and raised, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, at some point I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was 12. I've always loved the ocean. But going through school and growing up there, I learned a lot about, I had a love for nature because we were surrounded by mountains and the ocean. So I really liked spending time, hiking and in the woods and surfing. So I took jobs where I could surf, basically, back in the day, and that lasted into my early 20s. My first job was making pizzas for a pizza shop.
Hey, I want to go the pizza management route.
No. I got a job at the pizza place because I really liked pizza. So I got free pizza every shift. And a lot of times people made mistake pizzas, so I brought those home from my friends. That was great perk. Then I was offered a management position, and I took it because it was slightly better pay. Plus, late at night, you can kind of do what you want and it's quiet. So I had my fair share of pizzas, so I probably will eat very few pizzas going forward to this day. But I switched to Chili's after that. I really liked the food and I decided I wanted to work there. So I just told the manager right there. I was with my father at the time and I said, I'd really like to work here. So how do I apply? And I worked at Chili's from that time period up until my college days.
Got it.
Yeah. And then I went, grass is always greener, right? So waiting tables lost its luster after you do it for a while. It's not an easy job. It seems easy, it looks easy, but dealing with the public, it can be chaotic and you depend on tips, right? So I thought bartending would be a better bet. So I reached for the stars and wanted to be a bartender thinking this is going to make better money and I'll have more fun, which didn't fully realize itself. But that was the end of my food and beverage industry career.
But I'm sure there's, like you said, there's a lot that you learn kind of through that process. So, I mean, one of my first jobs outside of kind of working for my dad was a busboy at one of the restaurants here. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, in there, I remember showing up and they're like, hey, I asked them, well, what time's our lunch break? And they're like, you don't really get a lunch break, right? Because it was so busy, you kind of found time to take breaks. You work with the kitchen staff there and you would kind of like, all right, hey, here's a little something. And you would kind of eat in between because it was like a nonstop for, your 8 hours or whatever. So,
Yeah, I learned a lot. I think my biggest lesson was things aren't always what they appear. And that lesson is continuing to reinforce itself as life progresses. I also learned that the grass is not always greener. I got a job at a very prestigious country club bartending. It was fun, especially because you're in control of the liquor. So everyone comes to you for booze. But behind the scenes, dealing with drunks, belligerent drunks, isn't, at the end of the day, a rewarding experience career-wise. I kept those jobs because I really couldn't really see myself doing something else because my options, although I graduated, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was just scanning the internet. It was new in those days, surfing the papers to find something, and surfing in the ocean too, so twin surfing. And I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I realized I'm tired of working in the country club because it was very affluent community, so they're used to not being told no, and they always get their way. And I thought, well, I'm going to go find a job in a different bar. So I went to a dive bar, and I got total contrast. Now I'm in a place where people are just a lot more chill. They're a lot more down to earth, dealing with a lot of blue-collared workers, so they know what it's like to work really hard with their hands and labor all day. And I realized that they all share the same set of problems and complaints. It's just a question of how much money they make and what they're wearing at the end of the day. But that's what made me realize, yeah, this isn't going to be for me, so I have to find something else.
when you went into your college days, what did you start to study, and what did you think like, oh, I'm going to go to school for? You mentioned my marine biology at one point. Is that something that you're like, okay, maybe I'm going to learn about this and pursue that?
No, that was when I was preteen. When I was in high school, I the courses I did the best in were the hardest, the most challenging, and also allowed me to express myself creatively. English we had the reputationally most difficult English teacher, the most difficult teacher in the school. But I excelled in that class. I had to memorize sonnets and things like that, which ordinarily I wouldn't do. But because of the challenge, all bets aside, I'm going for it. So after high school, which I would have not passed, I actually did not pass high school initially. I had to take college courses early to get enough credits to graduate high school. I was very disengaged with the high school program. It was very rigid and linear, which was what it had to be and has to be. So I started taking college electives early, and I realized how much joy I found in being able to choose my path of education. So that allowed me to graduate high school. But when I entered college and I saw the course curriculum, which I went through, and everything from including biology, marine biology, computer science, I started to take initially psychology in the summer to graduate high school. And I found the topics to be really intriguing. And I also enjoyed that in high school. And I realized, gosh, if you can learn how the mind works, maybe you could do something with that, because everything comes from mind, really. And that's what made me realize, yeah, if I can choose my own courses for my own curriculum, I can pick courses that I think will shape me and my skills with where I would like to go. And that's that. So what I studied in college wound up being a mixture. I made my own curriculum in a way between communication, sociology, and psychology, those three, with some philosophy and even religion. And my goal in putting those together was to try to understand, sorry for the long answer, by the way,
No.
but I tried to study psychology to understand how people think and how I think, but then I realized it's very individualistic. And so it is very clinical. So I got some good material, but it doesn't consider the context of people and their relationships with one another. So then I studied sociology, macro and micro sociology, societies, groups, and I realized, yeah, that's what shapes individual psychology, right? You can't separate the individual from the group they grow up in. So that while doing sociology, then I was mapping out what I wanted to study, and I saw curriculum on logic, rhetoric, and communication. And I realized when I read the descriptions of all the different courses, the ability to communicate, the ability to articulate, and the ability to reason will go very nicely with the psychology and sociology pair. So I added that, and a lot of times people don't realize it, but they're reasoning through belief systems that stem back from childhood and upbringing and culture, religions and philosophies is in every household to one extent or another. So how to relate to people. So I tried to study things in college as broadly as I could that was about how relationships between people and within organizations work. Now, I didn't know what I wanted to do with that because people asked, what do you want to do with your degree? Are you going to be a sociologist? I said no, because I knew in the back of my mind, sociologists are also, it's a very narrow and fairly, well, it's a structure I didn't feel like was my calling, but I felt some kind of, at the time, some kind of intermediary, I forget what, a liaison or some bridge between groups that would help organizations function, international liaison or something, and that was in the back of my mind in college. So that's ultimately what drove my studies in my college days.
Nice. And then, like you said, everybody's like, hey, what are you going to do? That drove your studies. And were you able to, at least starting out, leverage any of that knowledge and education to then kind of jumpstart your career, or at least maybe start thinking about, okay, I think I'm going to go and try and find this route, like you mentioned, like this international studies, like, did you start applying for those types of roles, or what did that look like?
No, because everything I read, well, I didn't find something that intrigued me to apply for. And I was enjoying the freedom that comes with post-college and even during the end of college days of being able to, I went to UC Santa Cruz, so I could go and jump in the water in the morning, go to class, and then jump in the water in the evening, go back at night, in Santa Cruz Mountains and study. And I just really enjoyed that life. And post-graduation, I had to start figuring things out. So I started to look around for jobs, but I just wasn't finding something that excited me or felt like this will really engage me. And what happened there was I was living in a tree house. It was probably an 8x8, and that was in Felton with a family member at the time, and bartending. And I was really at a point where I just felt like I reached the end of the road post-college. I need to find something. So looking in the paper, I saw something that said account executive, and being very naive, I didn't know what an account executive did. But all the skills I studied in school, which, like I said, communication, philosophy, logic, and reasoning, those I was always using to some extent or another to navigate my way through situations. I had to deal with drunks. I had to deal with all kinds of situations with wherever I was. So, I did a lot of introspection also at the time. I was really focusing on trying to understand, what's going on in me and where do I want to go. So a lot of it was investing in my own inner development, you could say. And when I saw the job posting, I went and applied for it. And very quickly I learned that it was a Monday through Friday, 40-hour week, 9-to-5 cold calling job. And I knew that wasn't for me. So the word account executive did not reflect what the reality would be. So I just thanked the interviewer, and she said, we'd like to, why don't you apply to be a software instructor? We would love to have you interview. I think you might be a good fit. And I told her I'd never taught software before, but I love learning it because when I wasn't in school, I was studying as much software as I could because my dad bought me a computer. It was Windows 98. I was downloading software constantly to learn what it did, all the different functions and how different features relate, and then different applications and what they could do on the PC at the time. So I interviewed for the test teach. They offered me the job. It was Microsoft Word, very beginning course. They gave me 2 or 3 days to prepare. And then that is what really started my career in tech.
Wow.
It was, you could say, a stroke of luck.
Right. Well, sometimes I think that, right? Like it's a stroke of luck, but then also, I think, like you mentioned it, right? Having maybe you weren't a developer, but that curiosity in how software worked and understanding and having a computer, and also I would say the communication route, right? To be an instructor, like you have to be able to communicate. You also have to be able to, like, I'm kind of seeing parallels, like, with the psychology and how people are, I don't know, maybe it's 100% psychology, but like as you're teaching people, you have to kind of be able to read them and understand, like, are they understanding what I'm saying?
Right.
Because one of the things that I learned is like, does that make sense? Like, coming from me, you would think like, oh, I'm asking, but someone who might be receiving that says, well, if they're saying like, does that make sense the way I say it, or even just that use of that question might make them think like, oh, I guess it should make sense, but it doesn't. So I'm not going to say no. I'm just going to, yeah, of course it does.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of kind of what you learned that I'm sure helped you to be that, a good tech instructor, at least to start off.
Yeah, what happened was once I started teaching, they put me in front of the classroom. I remember very early on, I had to learn the software in order to teach it. So these were all software systems that I had very little or no exposure to. I took the job because they said you can work full time and you'll get a salary, but you don't have to work 40 hours, 5 days a week. So I said, great, I can continue doing the things that I love. At the time, I was surfing, and I didn't want to lose all of that. And then I was studying acupuncture with a local clinic, and that was a potential. And I remember in the clinic, I was talking to a woman there, and I told her about this opportunity with this computer training center. That's what it was. It was the name of the center was New Horizons. Okay, they're a very big franchise operation. And she told me, this is a gift, you have to take it. And I thought about it really hard because acupuncture, I was passionate about that knowledge and doing that. And I liked the environment of helping people. But at the same time, I saw how much, it's a hard business to run and to operate. And also there's some limitations in growth there. So I thought about it long and hard. So I took the New Horizons job, and right away, the whole process of being given material and ingesting it and then teaching it, it just fit, it clicked. So I wasn't nervous going up in front of the classroom. Might have been a little bit, but it was nominal. And I felt very at home. And I felt a genuine care for people's ability to comprehend and to get it in their own way so that they can use it to benefit themselves. And I think that is what really propelled. I left the bartending job very quickly after I took that job, and I was ready to leave. And I was ready to leave the food business altogether. And I immersed myself into this learning curriculum and software teaching job for the next 2 years. I completely immersed myself. I even voluntarily reduced surfing because I got so into the process, the exchange that I was having with the center and the students. It was kind of like I found what was leading to a dream job, but I didn't know what that would look like ahead of time. It had to happen organically.
Right. No, and I get it, because had you tried to force it and just, I think a lot of times, and again, it's not like this for everybody, but I think most of us are like, I have to figure it out early. And at least that's what I thought. Like, I have to know what I'm going to do. And just the more I would try different roles, different things. At one point, and I've talked about this, where I had someone that had asked me if I wanted to teach part-time, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like it would be fun. But similar to you, I had that experience of like, oh my gosh, like I never had a problem. Sure, you're a little nervous at first, but like it wasn't detrimental to me. I had given speeches and things like that, but getting in front of a classroom and teaching this, it was just that excitement of somebody kind of like, you could see all of a sudden when they understood it and they're like, okay, I get it. And they're going to be able to take this. I was teaching tech software, right? I was teaching VMware, but that process, but I also learned that I had to immerse myself more in the curriculum and in the technology. Like I was using VMware and I'm like, oh, I use this all the time. I can teach somebody. I could teach somebody that was already using it and was familiar with a lot of the concepts, a lot of how it works. So the questions they were asking me were different. But then when you start getting students that were newer to technology, right? Because it was part of a degree program at the college, when the types of questions they're asking, when I'm like, oh, it's it's a virtual network and blah blah blah, and would kind of move on. They're like, well, hold on, what's virtual network?
You have to back up.
You have to back up, and that was one of the things where I was like, wait a minute, there's something here. So then that fueled my desire to kind of want to learn more, right? I have to learn, and how do I learn this at that level to be able to explain it to somebody who doesn't know and do those analogies. So that sparked a passion that even now, content I write, a lot of things where I teach people, like it brings me so much joy to say, let me take this complicated concept and break it down so easily that somebody's like, oh, I get how it works now. I can go use it, or at least not be afraid of it.
Let's tie that back to my college days. So communication is, for me, the ability to interpret and calibrate and read someone else's reaction to what you're delivering. It's an exchange. So taking information and synthesizing it and delivering it so people can understand. But then understanding passes through a lens of perception, and that lens has its own shape from people's background, history, demographics, education, even belief systems, like we said. So in a way, the psychology and the communication and the philosophy were, in my opinion, fundamentals for being able to take something as abstract as software and, number one, make it relatable. So people in the classroom who know nothing about software, and some of them did, but some of them barely knew how to turn on a computer, how do I make it relevant to them so they want to learn? Because if people don't want to learn, they're not going to, right, even if their boss sent them. So if you know the demographic of my students in the classroom, an average class size was 30 people. Sometimes they'd have 10. Harder classes maybe have 5, and they'd go up to 50. And the people in the class were home business owners, people looking to develop vocational skills to get a job, people sent by their boss or employer to improve their skills, people going voluntarily to improve their skills so they could get a pay increase or maybe a better position in their current employer, and if not, then find a better job while they're still employed. And the home employed people, they were going because they wanted to learn how to run their business, so usually they were the most serious because they have something that they have to depend on. Now, I'm one person, I have to make this material relevant and interesting and understandable. Those three things, and they're not always in sync with one another, to 5, 10, 15, 20, or 50 people per class, 3 to 4 days a week. And then some of these classes were at night. So I wasn't always teaching during the day. I loved that because I could surf during the day, jump in my car, get ready for class, and go teach at night. And the night classes had an extra challenge. Everyone was getting off of work, so their brain is already saturated from the day. Now I have to make it exciting, the fourth dimension, enough for them to want to pay attention because they're tired. I have to wake them up. So all of the components need to be there in the teaching environment to get people to absorb and walk away with something valuable. And the last thing I wanted was to if I'm not engaging a class and they're not engaging me back, I'm bored. I might as well do something else. Because I can feel that in that group environment. And I had some really fun classes. I remember some of the students, let's just say that we did build a reputation in the community for being one of the best centers, and some of the students were repeat students. They would come back and take multiple classes. And it wasn't just me. We had brilliant instructors on staff at this center at the time. Anyway, from networking to security and design, art, through Photoshop, Illustrator, and business applications. So my focus was business applications, which covered the whole Office suite, accounting, QuickBooks, project management, and other applications like that.
It's interesting. And then you said you did this for 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, I did it from 2001 and 2002.
Got it. And then after kind of teaching, and it sounds like it allows you to kind of still be able to pursue your hobbies, and then you're able to kind of go through and help other people. What made you decide to leave, and what did you end up doing?
There's something very distinct that happened. There was a turning point in the teaching. I was immersing myself into teaching to where it became a hobby. Learning became a hobby. When I wasn't teaching in the classroom or preparing for classes, I was still very much involved in learning software because I was interested in how it worked. And I maintained my outdoor activities, but if I wasn't doing an outdoor activity like surfing, hiking, wilderness, adventures, I was on my computer learning something. And one day, I had a fairly good reputation at the center, so I'm really lucky to have that. And one day, a student approached and asked if I would do some moonlighting. And I didn't know what moonlighting was, but as it turns out, the school had nothing against me taking moonlighting gigs from students because it's not in competition with the center. So I took a couple of small jobs, but back up, before that happened, there was one event where the school asked if I would teach Microsoft Access. And a lot of people don't know what it is anymore because it was taken off the market. But what Access was, and it was a brilliant idea actually from Microsoft, is they gave people in the day-to-day business operation a tool from which they could build their own relational database with forms and reports and queries and automation in the Office suite. And I wasn't teaching anything about databases. I would teach Excel, but they asked if I would teach Access, and I said, why not? Because everything else was a success so far. So I'm doing Word, I'm doing Excel, I'm doing Microsoft Project. So then they hit me Microsoft Access. And the problem with Access is if you don't understand theory, you won't really understand how to use Access and apply it. So I studied as much as I could, meaning not enough. And the day I taught, I was not only ill prepared, but my father was having a double bypass. So I had an extra layer of tension and concern. I bombed the class. It was my worst class I had taught. I was embarrassed. I didn't know how to answer theoretical questions about the database, and I felt like I let people down. I let myself down. I let the students down. And I thought, this isn't happening again. So I went back to the drawing board, and I realized that there's a lot more that I need to study and to learn if I'm going to teach this, and I'm going to do this because the challenge interested me. And the topic of data was so new. I had no idea about database management. reporting, queries. I didn't know any of that stuff. It was so foreign to me because I wasn't a developer. I had zero IT background. So this was the first application that I actually had to develop some sense of IT information. That was in my early 20s. So everything before that was pretty straightforward applications. What you see is what you get. Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel. Yeah, you have formulas, but you can deal with that in the formula bar. But Access had many layers underneath that controlled and governed data and how people interact with data that I didn't know about. And there was theory behind that that made it work. So I studied really hard. I recouped my confidence and said, I'm going to do this. So they gave me another Access class. They gave me another shot. And within 3 to 6 months, I was delivering every Access class there was from the beginner to the advanced. And during that time, I was asking colleagues and friends for help to prepare, to understand things as well. Like I didn't just magically learn it. I had to go through a process and get help because there were developers on staff also who taught, but they taught programming, okay? They taught coding. That was way over my head. But Access can go into the realm of coding. So I started with the simple concepts of Access, and then as I started teaching, I got better at delivering the complex topics of relational database management, became so comfortable about how to explain how it worked that I was pretty much teaching student after student, class after class. This became a regular thing about what nailed me in the previous class 3 to 6 months ago, but doing it in a way that they could understand in a day, actually in a 6-hour class with a 1-hour break. They had to walk away understanding how to build an Access database within a 1, 2, or 3 day period from start to finish with table design, architectural data structures, queries, and reports. So I had to figure out how to take a very, what I would say is a complex topic, which most of the time database developers are the ones who are the keepers of that knowledge, and reduce it to something that anybody that's coming in from their business or running a home business can learn. Now, whether they go out and do it or not, that's of course not our job, but that's what became my job, because then in the course of the classes and teaching those, that's when the consulting opportunities started to show up, because people wanted to have help building in-house databases for their businesses.
Uh-huh. And how long did you end up doing that kind of consulting, kind of moonlighting and doing some of this work? And did you enjoy doing that? Like not only taking the theoretical, and I'm sure that you're building it, right? But for internal, but now actually having actual businesses and use cases to kind of do that.
I learned very quickly that I had to call on all the skills that I had studied in school in order to move into that consulting world, because it was a lot deeper engagement than classroom teaching. Teaching and doing are two different things. They're completely different. And teaching is helps you know your material, but doing and teaching, when they're coupled together, it's dynamite. I hadn't had the opportunity to do yet. I was only teaching. So getting these first gigs, I loved that kind of work because I could engage business owners where I had to learn their business, I had to understand their needs, and each of them are very unique. And then I had to figure out, how do I build what they're looking for and maintain that relationship? And they're paying me to do that. And that's what ultimately got me started in consulting. And I was thrilled not to be losing $200 or $300 a month in my net income, because that's where I was at the time.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, pretty much. I was able to get by for the first number of consulting appointments, but then as I would hit one success marker, I quickly learned that they would ask for more. And then I had to pace my learning. So I'm still teaching, but I have to pace my learning with them asking for more, and I don't know what they're going to ask for next. So now I'm having to learn on the fly stuff that's completely outside of the curriculum I'm learning. But as I'm building, I'm incorporating what I'm learning into my curriculum, which is over the curriculum, on top of the curriculum that's taught from the textbook. So students are now getting real world experiences and scenarios from what I'm building. And what I'm building is coming from a business owner until I got stuck because I'm not a developer. I did download VBA, Visual Basics, Basic for Access, and VB, and I studied those PDFs that you're talking about. Those just started coming out downloadable, and I did my best to learn. And I realized at this pace, because I'm not a developer, I wasn't trained in that. That's not my educational history. I had to acknowledge my limits, where I could go, and I started asking for help once I reached my limits. And they people in my center there were some very competent people there, got me past some obstacles. And that got these projects done. But there were other things that happened after that made things unfold took a different path altogether. But you have to depend on people and know your limits, but also push your limits too if you want to grow. And so there's a fine line between knowing your limits and staying within versus pushing your limits and asking for help. But the thing that was most rewarding of all of that was extending myself beyond what I thought I could, and then doing that in relationship with working with other people to solve challenges, whether it was with another person that was within the center helping me or with the customer themselves.
Got it. Interesting. So then is this, at this point, is that what really kind of led you to saying that I want to go down the tech or kind of that software route? Is those experiences teaching and consulting, and you said, you know what, maybe not I want a career at this point, but saying, hey, I think this is the area I might want to pursue more and learn about?
No, that wasn't it. There was one that was very distinct. It's similar to that, but a guy really stood out. Most of the students that came to the classroom were business owners, small business owners, or they represented a large company, and we did some consulting. But one guy in my class wanted to take me to lunch, and he had a certain way about him. I can't explain it, but he's the kind of person that if he sees something in you, he will draw it out, and he will allow it to flourish. And he asked to take me to lunch. He did, and he showed me this diagram of a huge set of tables and structures for workers' compensation, and safety, OSHA compliance. Now, I'm accustomed to small database projects, which might consist of 5 or 10 tables. He showed me like 50 tables in a diagram. I didn't know where those were coming from either, nor did I understand any of the language in those tables, the references, the information that's contained in them. All of them are they're technical business knowledge, not technical computer, but they're technical like compliance, deep into compliance and injury reporting and workers' compensation, insurance programs and stuff like that. So I didn't understand that stuff. But he asked if I would be willing to build a database with him because his boss sent him there to learn how to build databases, and he would like some help building one. So I didn't know who the company was. I was pretty naive. I guess ignorance is bliss, right, as they say in the Matrix. But I was not really understanding what I was getting into. But I was hesitant, and he could see that I was hesitant. I just looked at it, and I stared at it while we were at lunch, and I didn't really know what to say. And he coaxed me. He said, just come and meet my boss. Come to the office and meet my boss for lunch. And I agreed to that, and I drove to a facility. This was my first time in a big commercial facility. So I was a little overwhelmed, to be honest. And I walked in, and this facility was, one of the biggest businesses in the Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Salinas area, even Monterey area. Actually, one of the biggest construction companies on the West Coast. So I didn't know of what they did. All I knew is I'm going in to learn more about what their needs are, because that's how I handled every opportunity. So as it turns out, they wanted me to build, and I was still working on my own. So I was still freelancing, but I was freelancing with no company at the time. And no, I did actually, no, I did have a company. I started the company initially not thinking it was going to be a career. I actually started the company because I wanted a structure to work within for accounting, because I had to teach accounting in QuickBooks. So I thought, well, I'm making this money. Why not manage it with all the expenses, the travel, the mileage? Let's do this right. Even if it's such a small scale, let's just do it right. So I wanted to track my business, my time, everything that I'm doing for these moonlighting businesses, right? So it was more of a structure so I could operate the consultancy through. So when I went to meet this person's boss, they explained the project, and he just I felt that he wanted to make this happen, but I felt inspired. He just had a way about him that was inspiring to people who were around him, and I felt that. And I took the job, and I said, "Yeah, let's do this." So that job was the biggest and the most challenging job that I had taken to date in the consulting world for database, and that took us about a year.
Wow. And I think what you're describing with that person is leadership, right? It is, you know, outside of titles, I think I've seen those people that are able to kind of move and kind of get people excited and inspired around them. Like in my experience, I've worked for a couple of those people, and I've been around people, even if I haven't worked for them, but like they do. In my experience, that's a great leader, right? Someone who's able to kind of go through and, like you said, pull out of you to make you better and say, hey, how do I get this person not only on board to their vision and what they're trying to accomplish, but also at the same time, it sounds like push you a little bit out of your comfort zone to have you grow at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. And then I just realized there's another part of it. The person that I met, his name is Chuck. He was the safety coordinator at the time for this company. His boss, Bill, he's kind of a grandmaster of OSHA compliance. And I didn't know what OSHA compliance was at the time, but what I felt from them was their openness to share knowledge with me so I could help them. It was really a two-way street exchange. And Bill, with all of his knowledge, was actually in a way mentoring Chuck, because Chuck was also learning the ins and the outs of compliance. So when we were in their office together, it was really a sincere, I was the student and they were the teacher, and they're willing to teach me what I needed to know to then transform something that didn't exist into a product that they could use. And they were willing to do that. And that came to fruition, and we delivered, and we had a lot of fun doing that because we had to work together to tackle all kinds of challenges, because we really pushed Access to its limits. I had to learn, development within Access, and at that point, I asked for more help from people around me, but we got it done, and that is what really made me realize I really enjoy this kind of work, not just because of the technical work, but because of the collaborative nature of taking on challenges and getting ideas together as a group and making something happen.
And were there other situations where and maybe it wasn't as collaborative? And the reason I say that is because I've had those situations where, again, when everybody's sharing information and you're collaborating, it's great, right? Even when there's challenges and it gets hard, it's still rewarding to kind of get past that, where is I've had not many, but I've had a couple situations where that information doesn't flow as freely. Like there's a little bit of that kind of gatekeeping. Like, did you encounter any of that? Either through consulting or through like through your career, where you felt like you were having to kind of maybe you weren't getting the information that you needed, and then maybe had to go and either figure it out on your own or find other ways.
I've had those situations since, but during this period,
or even since, like even if it's later, I'm just curious, like how you approach that type of situation.
where I'm not getting information needed.
Right. Just to kind of do the contrast of like.
Yeah. So at the same company, I did have a lot of interactions with various people within the company, and going back to those days. And there were some people who were willing to freely exchange information and knowledge to help the success of a project, and there were some people who won't or wouldn't. But yeah, I've encountered those situations before, and I try to focus on the ones who are, of course, willing to help. And also, maybe for if we run into an obstacle, we got to look for other resources with the knowledge, or we have to somehow find a way to figure it out and to move past it by trying alternative methods and getting more people to the table with ideas. But yeah, that's happened before. But if it happens and it goes far enough, somebody's got to step in and make information available. It might come from a higher up. In this particular case, this system was very critical to this business, so the direction came from the top to make it successful, and obstacles would be removed one way or another and resolved. But yeah, that happens, and if we have the right support and resources, then those can be overcome. But sometimes you have to, in a way, it's like navigate who are the right people to go to get to the information you need, or who will lead you to the right information. That sometimes goes to executive level.
Got it. And then I want to make sure that we spend a good enough amount of time on this. So, we're going to kind of fast forward. So what is it that led you to kind of building and founding, the kind of risk management insurance company that you have now? Like, was it something that just through different experiences that you had, did you find a specific need and said, hey, I see a problem here, and I think I'm uniquely positioned to solve this?
I learned a lot about that organization just from working with the safety department. And the safety department is responsible for what? Keeping people safe. Our project was a prototype. It existed because I had already taken a vendor and agreed to purchase their product, but they didn't have a web-based platform yet because those didn't exist at the time. So at the time, they were looking for a prototype that they can then give to the vendor to build a web-based system. So I was tasked with creating a Microsoft Access database with an interface and tables and queries and reports that the vendor could then build a web application for. So this was, the first web application days in the early 2000s, just after the turn of the millennia. So with some help, I built most of the Access database, and then I ran into some really challenges with queries. So I have a colleague from the teaching center helped me through some rough spots, and we got it done. We built a full prototype in maybe 6 to 8 months. And I really enjoyed the process of working with him. I was probably in their office more than I was in the teaching office, because the teaching wasn't full-time, which was convenient, so I could moonlight if I wasn't teaching. And I knew the material so well by then teaching, I didn't have prep work to do. I just show up and teach. So I learned, I teached. So now no more learning. I'm just teaching, and then I'm doing moonlighting, but all the moonlighting goes and nurtures the teaching. So I'm still taking some new clients as well. But this one in particular, I was focusing on because of the complexity and the size. So we finished the prototype, and then a year passed maybe, and I was working on other clients while working at the center, and I didn't hear back from them. So I figured that's done. But it wasn't until they reached out a year after we finished or so and said, we need to talk. And this was the turning point was they said, I called me into the office and they said, we have not gotten this system up and running yet. This system is several years overdue for starters. Now this is a publicly traded company and they were doing $2.5 billion at the time. So they're a pretty big company and they have compliance they need to follow. They have shareholders that they need to report to. They have boards of directors. So this is a very high profile project. And I didn't know what this product was being used for until, we really got going. So I knew all along it wasn't a permanent product, it was a prototype, and I was fine with that. But when they called me back in and asked, we want you to build our web front end, and you have 8 weeks to do it. And I said, guys, I'm not a developer by trade, I'll need to hire a developer. And the words that I got back were from Bill, it was, son, you do whatever you need to do.
Wow.
And so that was the end of the week, and I was very apprehensive. So I went back to my colleague at the time, and I told him the situation. And over the weekend, he programmed an interface for an incident entry form. And I took that back to, and they said, when can you start? So we have a conference in 8 weeks, might have been 6 weeks, and we need to be able to present this incident entry form at this conference so people can see that it's actually done, because the flights are booked and we have 100 people flying from around the country to come to Monterey to watch this presentation that doesn't exist yet. So at that point in time, I jumped all in to facilitate and make this happen. And I had my first real resource jump all in. And we were still teaching, but every moment of spare time, we were investing into this project. And he built, because he's a developer and a very good one. And he built a full he didn't build a presentation. He built a web front end on another vendor's database that would actually save data and report on data and so forth, and within their structure, which I could see how complex that was because he didn't design the database architecture. This was coming from some other system. We ultimately had to reverse engineer that. That's where the database theory and fundamentals helped me a lot, because I had to look behind the scenes at what is the whole relationship table structure of this other system that was written in C++, and that application had to be installed on everyone's machine who's using it, by the way, and it's all tied to a server. So the slowness of everything going to every workstation was really clear. He pulled it off. He built a prototype, a model, a workable incident reporting screen. And one obstacle we had was the IT department didn't want to have anything to do with us or this project. So I was on my own in that sense. And so I brought my laptop, I installed a Windows server, and I set it up as a server and plugged it into the projector so we could actually host the website with a server and IP address from a local laptop, because we had no server that we could deploy this to that would make it available over a web browser. And you can't run a web application without a server. So we had to produce a web server on my clunky old laptop and then host it to 100 people at this conference with no IT support, and we did. And we pulled it off.
And I'm sure that, a lot of kind of the learnings that you had again, learning the theory and then putting together the, for these different business clients, the little bit of consulting, all that kind of culminates into this, presentation, right? Because that, hey, here's the business problem, right? It's magnitudes of scale larger, but you understand and you're like, okay, I know the theory, I know what we have to do, knowing that, hey, I need a server in order to run my website. Okay, I'm not getting it. I know enough to say it's not going to be the best, right? It's not the fastest, it's not the most powerful, but I can do this off of my laptop, and here's how we're going to go through and do that.
Yeah.
So that to me is just, again, that's problem solving at its finest.
We had to improvise.
Right. You have to improvise, you have to go through, and again, knowing that it's not the long-term solution, right? Like, if you just said like, yeah, here's the final product, I would have been like, oh, I don't know about this. But knowing that, hey, I've got to improvise, I have to fix this problem. Like you said, here's this obstacle, I'm going to get around it, I'm going to fix it. Now we're good, and now we can probably go through and implement this properly.
Well, that's what happened actually. So after we presented that first version, you could call it, they went back to the drawing board. The conference was a success. Everyone went home. And then the company asked, we want you to build our entire web-based system from scratch and build your own database, because we're not going to continue working with this other system we bought, which was a fairly costly system at the time. So we then proceeded to build a homegrown design build workers' compensation injury reporting system for this company. They had 10,000 employees at the time, and it was designed to capture injuries from the field. Safety supervisors could submit them. Anyone could submit injuries. They notify administrators. And it sounds simple, but this company has to report on their incident rates in order to get jobs. They bid for the government. They bid for, bridges, dams, and roadways. That's their main bread and butter construction project. So to qualify, you have to have certain incident rates. You have to have certain threshold of non-injuries per work hour. So we had to build a database that would take hours worked of 10,000 employees, and then we had to build a front end which took injuries from those employees and built metrics that said what is your injury rate per hour for hundreds of locations and subsidiaries that operated under the umbrella of this construction company. And then we had to integrate it with their Active Directory network and then put it on their server and let them run nationwide with it, which we did.
I mean, that sounds just exciting, challenging. I mean, I can imagine that it was probably a roller coaster of things that you go through, right? Like there's the challenge of running into problems and, having to figure it out. Like it's frustrating, but then you get past it and then it's exciting and it sounds like you're learning a lot. And there's just, I can't imagine that would be, especially for someone like you who seems like very interested in learning and kind of growing, that would have been a very fulfilling time to kind of go from idea, and each time that you're building something and kind of prototyping it and saying, okay, now build it bigger, build it better, build it faster.
Right.
And it's a constant iteration.
Well, that's what happened for this particular platform.
Mm-hmm.
And sometime during the development, now this platform we built and rolled out and updated and maintained for over the next 10 years plus. And in the first year or so of building this platform, probably within the first year, I'd been with the training center for 2 years, about a year and a half. So just after I started this project, I had a few other clients in the area. They were smaller scope, but they were still coming in. I basically decided that I need to leave the training center to pursue A1 full-time, my business, not somebody else's business. And I make that leap of faith, if you will, so I could completely immerse myself into A1 as a custom software development company. So I did that in 2003. That's when I left the training center. So I had 2 really good full years of teaching software for the computer training center, and then I immersed into A1. And then what happened was, after this project got released, the safety project, 2 things happened. Other departments started asking for their own web-based application within the same construction company. And of course, working with some people there, I met other people who were part of that organization, other department managers, users, executives. So they started to want to upgrade their technologies because they saw what we did for the first department, the safety department. So now I don't have any time for marketing A1. I never really had to, because I'm inundated. And I still had hired people full-time to help with this. So I hired more people full-time to help with taking on additional database projects for this company. And they're all design build products. So that means we're building them to spec. And although we owned the source code, we couldn't repackage and resell those products because they're built very specific to the organization's needs. You see? So we didn't have a product that we could commercialize. But so that's one thing that happened. The second thing that happened was I built such a close relationship with the initial guy that brought me into this construction company, Chuck, that he left the company sometime after and went and worked as a department chair at a local college. And the weakness in the college was computers and software. And he's asked me if I would co-teach with him computer software applications for construction and energy management. And that was at Cabrillo in Santa Cruz. And since this company is in Santa Cruz and Cabrillo's in Santa Cruz, they're 15 minutes from one another, I said, why not? It's just an evening gig. So I went right back into teaching again, only it was evenings twice a week, not full time. So I could manage that while I'm still building these systems for this construction company. And everybody that worked for A1 was working from home. So that's how that happened. Yeah, and I guess the other part of it I needed to solve, you were talking about problem solving. I had a problem of I didn't have the revenue or the backing to open an office. And when you open an office, you depend on people who live locally and the pool of resources locally as well. So one problem that I needed to solve was to build a network center where developers could work remotely. So at the time, I was living in San Jose. I moved from Santa Cruz back to San Jose, and I decided to put a T1 line in my garage, and I found that through a provider. And then I had purchased a number of workstations, towers, servers, and installed and set up Windows Server 2000 at the time, and hosted a remote development network over Citrix, which is an old, style terminal session where people could remote into a server and basically code, but they could work remotely. Right. So that's what allowed me to hire developers from all over the country. We had developers working on servers out of my garage in San Jose for the first 7 or 8 years. And that continued up until 2009 or 10 before we went to a hosting provider.
Right. Because I'm curious, was that common to run something like that? Because I've heard of a couple people around that time, right, to kind of set up servers and set up an environment like out of their house. And is that something, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, correct?
Well, it was a necessity.
Right.
I didn't know if it was common because I didn't take the time to ask if other people are doing this and who's doing it. I didn't even have much of a network in San Jose. I mean, I was so inundated with driving to and from San Jose to Santa Cruz, managing the customer, coming back, and then running network cables under my house to the server, putting in cooling fans in the garage because it gets hot in San Jose. I mean, I was always trying to figure out how to solve one problem or another. And if a server goes down, your developers can't work. Now I need 2 backup servers and replication so I can have the source code base on 3 servers so any one of them can be accessed. I mean, I didn't have time to even think about anything other than how do I get this thing done and set up? And by the time that's done, it's time to go back and work with the client. So I had to learn, to an extent anyway, network engineering to build that so that we could operate as a company. And over time, I learned I would like to outsource networking. And that's when cloud hosting really came into the picture, which led to, AWS and Azure and services like that.
Right. This has been a great conversation. I know that you've told me a lot of great stories, answered a lot of my questions. Is there anything that kind of we haven't covered or something that you want to talk about, as we kind of start kind of wrapping the conversation up that, I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to talk about anything that is important to you, so that it doesn't get missed.
Well, one question you asked, which I didn't answer yet, was how did we evolve to an enterprise risk management software company? Yeah. So to answer that question, we built multiple systems over a 10 or 12 year period. We touched insurance, we touched automobile claims, we touched workers' compensation claims, litigation. So over that time period, because we worked on so many different departments and department owners, we got to understand the business knowledge and some of the technologies they're working with and what their needs are, the needs of the managers, the executives, and the users. So after the market dropped in 2008, crashed, we didn't have much work over that time period with mergers and acquisitions, and companies' funding was drying up from custom development. So I chose to invest what I still had into building a product. And the idea of that product was, how can we take the body of knowledge that we have collected over the last 8 or 9 years and build a software product out of that would allow companies to have more control and tailor the software to their unique business, so we don't have to charge them for every single continuous change that they ask for as their business needs change. And we can teach, and the people using the software are empowered enough and knowledgeable and confident to make those changes and to engage us on what otherwise is usually a business analyst or just IT people making those decisions. You let the business owners make the decisions on how they want the software to function, and give them some flexibility with the software or control over the software so they can make those kinds of changes in many cases themselves. So we wanted to build a comprehensive platform that had these different topics that we had covered previously, which led us to the A1 Honeycomb concept, which is an 18-module-based ERM software that touches many departments in a company, but in one unified platform.
Wow. And how long has that been under development?
We started it in 2009, and we're still building it.
Right.
And we did not market it as an ERM for the first 7 or 8 years, quite frankly, because ERM was still new, and I didn't want our competitors to know what we were doing. To avoid that, we built microsites. Microsites, whereas we had one website for claims management, one website for insurance management, one website for contract management, and they were all individual sites that looked like they had just this is its own product. But underneath it, it was all one unified product. And finally in 2018, we rebranded with the help from our team, And we built one comprehensive enterprise ERM software website that brings all of the modules under one umbrella to show the market that, yeah, this is all one product. And we wanted to do that so we could at least have maybe a leg up on competition. We're a self-funded company, and it's a very, it's getting to be a more crowded space, but we figured flying below the radar and operating in stealth marketing while we're at least building this idea so it gets mature enough, and when the market is ready, we'll have more reception to our product. And we believe now, after 16 years of product development, every feature in our product, everything it does, has come from a user of the product. We have not just built things that we are assuming the market needs. It has come from a request, and our customer base is our biggest product developer and our biggest investor. And we want to honor that by giving them what they need. So the best way to do that is to learn what they need and then adapt to that so that you can continue building that serves the needs of not just, of course, one user, but the broader marketplace of users across those different segments.
And I love that approach. I've talked about that with other people in the past, is just you're really understanding what is their need, what is their problem, and solving and trying to fix that or address it and help. Maybe it's not a problem, maybe it's just, hey, this is the process that I do. How do I tailor to make it easier or less friction, or make sure that the software does what it is that you need it to do, and not like, well, from a technical aspect, this would be really cool to have, and this is how it should work. So this is what you should do, and this is how you should use it. And they're going to be like, well, either one, they're not going to use it because that's not their process, or two, they're going to fight you every step of the way.
When a product is built, it's usually designed by a product manager, product architect, who does homework and research and assesses the market need. And then the funders fund it, and they build it, and they go to market, and they push it on the market. We had 10 years of custom software development a la carte first. What that means is we were constantly getting feedback from users and buyers and customers on what their needs were, so we could produce what's usable for them. At the end of the day, if the people using the software don't want to use it, you've got no buyer, you've got no users. It's a ticking clock how long they're going to last. We wanted to build a product that could last for years with an organization. We have some customers that have been with us for more than 10 years now. 10 years, 12 years, and one for 15 or 16 years from the beginning. And one thing that I've learned is when you let people grow into a product without forcing them into a rigid structure, if they have the time and the bandwidth and they're willing to engage you, you can go a lot farther and give them a better ROI for their investment than if you hand them a rigid thing that theoretically you assume what they want, but you miss so many nuances, and that's discoverable later after implementation. So we wanted to build a product that could adapt. One of our core values is to adapt. That's one of the reasons why. And the other thing is, from a resource perspective, internally, if we are the kind of environment where we want innovative thinkers, we want people who think creatively, who want to engage in solving problems, because that's what the customers need. But if you can't draw out what the issues are, how do you solve the issues you don't know what they are? So how to engage the buyer in that way, it's no different than what we did doing custom development. The only difference is we have a product architecture that we can use now as a framework, and we can really allow anyone coming in to work with that instead of having to build one from scratch. And that's, I think, the marriage between custom software and off the shelf. We, in a way, bundled those two concepts together. And a customer can take the custom software as far as they want, but the off the shelf is already there. And it's up to the buyer to decide which direction they want to go. And engaging in that creativity is part of the internal reward, not just for the buyer, but for us internally, because we know we're solving a problem that's a real problem, and it's not we're not giving them shelfware. We're giving them something that's usable at all levels in the organization. So we build something, we want it to appeal to the executive team, as well as the managers and supervisors, as well as the employees that are hands-on. Because if the employees don't engage it, the executives and the managers won't get the data flowing up in the reporting, and the software will be of no use.
Right. This has been an amazing conversation, just as much as I thought it would be. I mean, just in the little bit that we had talked prior to this and kind of putting this together, like your experiences, your stories, I've found so much that I've learned, so much insight. So I'm excited for everybody that's watching and listening to kind of be able to kind of get the same experience I did and learn, from you. So I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's people who are building their careers. This show is, career downloads. I didn't have my objective was to find a passion that would support me. And that was my objective. So I had a framework. Like, that was my intention, but I didn't know what direction that would take me. But I was led there by feeling the opportunities that showed up and sensing, is this a fit? And can I see myself going in this direction? And when I had the mentors show up, these became lifelong mentors for me. Bill and Chuck, for example, and there are some others. They became career mentors that started with one project. And I immersed myself. So people who are looking at what to do with themselves, I'm involved with the UNLV Lee Business School, and I'm exposed to students that are just about to embark on their career path. And I'm seeing where they're at and reflecting on where I was and remembering the value of staying open. And it's okay to try different things, but be broad and learn diverse topics, and something is bound to click and connect with combining the career with the passion. And that's what happened for me. And it took some time to get there. But sometimes you don't have a plan on how that's going to happen. You have to be in tune with your environment and the people that you're with.
I would agree. I had a very similar experience, and that's kind of what I try to bring, with this show is, for people who are there, is just expose them to some of these other topics and ideas, and hopefully it sparks and says, hey, you know what, I never thought about databases, or I never thought about software development, or just any number of things, or maybe they did, but they didn't understand how I would go about it. So again, this show came out of a passion of just speaking to other people and learning what they're doing and saying, well, I didn't know that was a thing. And now being able to share that with a broader audience to expose them so that then they can say, well, he didn't know. I thought I was the only one. Let me go and do something similar, right? There's no one path to get anywhere.
No, and the one other thing to mention I would say is, we have quite a remarkable team of people that bring ideas and that exchange knowledge. Both, in Philippines and India, who have been engaging with us in product development for years. And the more challenges we overcome as a group, the more creative we get in coming up with solutions. And we can pivot and leverage one idea into the next challenge because it's a cumulative knowledge that really happens there. But when you're working on your own, that's a good focus time. But really, I think when you're working as a group to tackle those things, people can bring out those qualities that ultimately lead an individual career, but also an organization to a higher level of success.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, thanks again. And for everyone that continues to watch, listen, and support, again, thank you for following us and learning from all the diverse guests. So with that, continue to plug in and download the knowledge. And until next time, thank you.